Well, it's mid-July, and over the past number of weeks I've been paying regular visits to this small patch of meadow, which is part of a larger meadow currently grazed by sheep. And I've been drawn back again and again, mainly because it's a damp part of the meadow. There are rushes in the area. It's quite sheltered, but this evening there's a little bit of a breeze blowing, and you'll notice these marsh thistles behind me, which are typical of wet meadow areas. The reason I'm here is to photograph dragonflies, butterflies and other insect life, and this time of the day, it's about 8 o'clock through to 10, when the sun dips behind the trees. There is a wonderful time, because on a calm evening, dragonflies and butterflies, they rest and go into a torpid state overnight. And if you're lucky enough, and if you search carefully, and sometimes it takes 20, 30, 40 minutes for me to find an insect, particularly in the dim light, on the tops of the rushes or the stalks of grass here. But if you find them close to sunset, it's unlikely that they will move or move readily. And therefore it's an ideal time of day to come out and to photograph them. And that's what I'm here this evening to do. So having insects in a state of torpor and in a static state, and positioned on a particular piece of rush or thistle or grass, and being still, that's a bonus. But a bigger bonus in the evening is the actual light, because once that sun drops down behind the trees here that border the meadow, well, then you've got a very neutral light, which is perfect for photographing insects, because of their exoskeletons reflect light so readily. So the neutral light is absolutely essential to capturing the full colour gamut and detail on the insect's body. So let's go around and see what we can find this evening. So I've come out this morning, the following morning, with the hope that I may find some butterflies or dragonflies with their wings covered in dew. Unfortunately, overnight the dew wasn't quite what I would have expected, and there's very little dew in the grass, and the cool weather has continued. The breeze is slightly calmed down today. So what I thought I'd do, since there aren't many butterflies around, is just to maybe, if you're starting off in wildlife photography and macro photography, just to go through some of the simple equipment that's required. Well, most importantly, and the first thing, is a tripod. Particularly if you're coming out in the evening or in the early morning where the light is quite subdued, a tripod is essential. So what I tend to use is actually a small tripod. It's like a little travel tripod that's just more nimble. It's sturdy enough and it gets me low down into the grasses where the insects are resting. So the second thing, obviously, that you'll need is a macro lens, and they come in all shapes and sizes. I have a small 60mm lens at home, but my favourite lens to use is the 200mm lens. It's a Nikon 200. It's not a fast lens, it's a f4. What I really like about this lens is the focus wheel, and it's advisable to use manual focus. Just because of the depth of field. It's a very narrow depth of field we're talking about, and to use a higher aperture, even in subdued light. So to bump up the ISO, get it up past f8, and therefore even the tiniest difference in distance between, say, the wings of a dragonfly and its head, which is, we're only talking about a couple of millimeters, that f8 or f9 will ensure in most instances that you get the full insect in focus. And really that's only where it's flat against the actual camera lens. So the angle of the lens is also very important. So try not to focus down or up, to try to get it flat on. So that means level with the insect, and also that the insect isn't turned this way or that way, that it's flat onto the camera. And that's probably the best means to get your subject in focus. Now, in addition to a lens, what can be handy from time to time, and I must admit I don't use it all the time, is a diffuser. So earlier on in the evening or later in the morning, when the sun, and it doesn't look as if it's going to come out today, it's too bright, you can just basically place it with your hand, so the sun will be blocked or diffused from illuminating the insect, and that's really just to ensure that your highlights aren't blown out. Now, one very, very important piece of equipment in macro photography, and it might be unusual, is a scissors. So a scissors is absolutely necessary. What tends to happen, it's a busy environment, the grasses and sedges and the landscape of this miniature forest, essentially, that's what it is, it can get in the way of the actual subject. So you may have a rush head that's obscuring partially the view, or just aesthetically it doesn't make a pleasing image. Maybe if you're placing the insect on a right third, there may be a rush on the left that just doesn't provide the backdrop, a pleasant backdrop to the insect. So again, very carefully, you're just basically just snipping the base of one or two rushes or grasses, just in composing the area around the insect. Because macro photography is quite simple, and once the insect is in focus as such, the important thing is what's in the background. Be very focused about what's in the background, what looks unpleasant, what adds to the scene. I prefer a very simplified scene in some of the photographs I take, and in other photographs I take where I have enough bokeh or blur in the background and it's quite a busy scene, it may add to it, particularly when there's pleasing light at sunset or sunrise. So there's two types of photographs that I tend to go with. The last thing that I'd point out is a small LED light, and this is just a tiny one. You can pick it up really cheaply on Amazon. I carry it, but I actually don't like using it. And when I bring a photograph home after using this, even such a subtle light, I notice that it's an artificial light and I don't like it. And I find that macro photography, where the use of flash is used, I find it unpleasant to look at, and I'll always notice it in a photograph. No matter how good a photograph is, I always notice flash was used there, artificial light was used there, and I really don't think it adds to the scene. The insect isn't subject to artificial light, or artificial light, I should say, and I don't think we should be capturing wildlife in the lens in an artificial environment with artificial light. So it's just my opinion on that. So that's really it for this morning. It's quite breezy again, it's cool, there's not many dragonflies or butterflies about. I've actually been trying to photograph hares over the last hour, and let me tell you, if you're new to wildlife photography, go in the macro direction because you'll have some success. It's a magical world. You know, you could ask the question, why focus on macro photography? Once you get down into the grass and you see these creatures, these dragonflies and insects and butterflies, see the colours, see their behaviour, their movement, it's fascinating. You're sucked into a brand new world that you've never really seen before. And that really is something quite magical. So if you are new to wildlife photography, you know, don't be afraid to take a macro lens, and you don't even need to buy a macro lens. A 50mm lens with a couple of cheap extension tubes will take you there initially. And actually, the extension tubes are a wonderful way to start into macro photography. So I'm going to leave it there for this morning, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. Next time, hopefully we'll be back with a little bit of landscape photography. So there it is. Thank you.